It's 3:30. We're going to call to order the special meeting of the Solid Waste Management Authority of the City of Crescent City, County of Del Norte, State of California. Would you please call the roll? Here. Here.
Howard.
Here. All right. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And again, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will open up with public comment. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter that is on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from myself, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment this afternoon? Seeing no public comment, we will close public comment. And before we go into our open session, we do have an urgency item. In order for us to entertain this, we do need to bring it first. This is the invoice number WD-0131-899, and this is an amount of $26,766. And this came in after the agenda was presented, and it is timely that it will need to be paid prior to our next meeting.
Move to approve, Chairman.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Kellen?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Score?
Yes, very good. We will add that item. Under the consent, we have the minutes from the special session on Tuesday, November 14th, 2017. Any public comment on our consent? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the authority for action.
Move to approve consent calendar.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Kellen?
Yes.
Chair Score?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Very good. We'll go on to our treasurer's report, and I think you have some of this in your agenda packet and some of it on the dais with you. So, Mr. Ward, take us through here, please.
Yes, our cash on hand in our accounts is currently $1,069,187.98 plus $198 for our last month's rent. So our cash flow is looking good. Again, looking at the claims approved by director, you'll see that the largest payment, as always, goes to the Hambro WSG for the good services they provide at Del Norte County Transfer Station. And we have two fairly large invoices paid for the landfill repair work to Hemmingson Construction. Looking at the additional items that were handed out, we didn't have these available at the time the agenda was published, but our cash flow again is looking good. We're paying under the framework that was adopted under the last change order with Hambro WSG, so the amount of the adjustment has gone down. But in general, our revenues are still over budget. At this point in time, our authority service fees at the transfer station are $45,074 ahead of budget, and our franchise fees are $6,295 ahead of budget. So in general, our accounts are looking good. The accounts payable, which is also there, again, are brought up to date due to the good work of Catherine Brewer, our administrative assistant, but you can see that there's very few outstanding balances. Those over 90 days have already been referred to collections. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Have any questions? One? Okay. Let's go on then.
That urgency item that was added.
Okay.
Okay.
You want to go ahead and talk to us about this invoice?
I'd be happy to. So this is discussion and possible action regarding a payment of a claim in an amount not to exceed $26,766 for the invoice for the annual permit fee for the Crescent City landfill. This is the invoice from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. A few years ago, authority staff successfully appealed for a reduction in this annual fee, And had that effort to have this fee reduced not been successful, this fee would have been $66,922. Thus, this fee reduction represents an annual savings just this year alone of $40,156. The amount of this fee is within budget, and staff recommend approving payment of this invoice.
Just a little bit of a question about this.
Uh-huh.
What does this have to do with, I mean, it's a fee to the Water Quality Management Board. Why? Why are we paying this?
Anything that could potentially impact the water quality has to have waste discharge requirements. And so this landfill, because it doesn't have a bottom liner, is always going to be a potential threat to water quality. So there is a waste discharge requirements permit that's associated with closed landfills. And that's based on the threat and complexity rating. So initially, we had a 1A threat complexity rating for this facility, which essentially made it equivalent to the most dangerous closed landfill in the state. We disagreed with that assessment, and we challenged it, and so we currently are paying the rate for a 2A facility, which again reduces our fees by over $40,000 annually.
Okay, and what does this fee go towards? Like
It
what
essentially goes towards the Regional Water Quality Control Board staff for oversight.
You're helping to build a bureaucracy. There's a lot of,
We're just not helping quite as much as we used to.
correct.
Which is a good thing.
And that is correct, Chairman. No, there's a lot of these type of permit fees, as
Yep.
the director said, that go into supporting staff and growth of staff positions, not only within the regional board, but also at the state level. It's not always fair. I know in the industry that I work in, the fees are quite significant to the regional water quality control boards. Not necessarily the same as this in threat rating. It's done a little differently under a waiver system, but there's new fees being established on a yearly basis, and it goes almost entirely to support new positions within the bureaucracy. In this case, Northwest Regional Water Quality Control Board.
And these fees used to be paid through the general fund, and then when there was a crisis for the California General Fund, many of these things shifted.
That's how it usually goes.
Well, I mean, it is important to note that our staff has done a great job of questioning this threat level and getting this down. And so in essence, we have $44,000 more that we can
Yep.
put to use into our community by simply saying, your numbers are wrong. And it's also part of the reason why this needs to be an urgency item. If there's one payment that you don't want to be late on, it's this one.
Yep.
That makes
You don't want to give them any reason for coming back and saying, well, yeah, you're not making your payments on time. And trust me, our payment at the city for the wastewater treatment plant is much higher than this, and it's one that you don't want to mess with, so.
This is one that we were able to get last year, or was it early this year that this occurred? I can't recall the
It was,
timeline on that.
the last 2 years we paid
Yeah,
reduced rates.
I couldn't remember, but yeah, that was a considerable amount of discussion amongst this
Very
commission
good.
at the time, and the director gets a lot of kudos for this one.
Absolutely. Okay,
Make a motion to approve it?
I have a motion to
Second.
approve this invoice and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Then would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Skor?
Yes, very good. We're going to move on to item number 3, landfill post-closure. You have a change order for this, Mr. Ward?
Yes, this change order number 2 is with Hemmingson Construction, and it simply extends the working period for them. The landfill repairs are nearing completion, but we already expected them to be done, and there's no point in having the contract expire when there's still work to be done. So staff recommend approval of this change order, which does not affect the contract price in any way. It merely extends the term for the work to be done.
Very good. Any questions?
Move to approve?
Got a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Any public comment on this change order? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back. Would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Skor?
Yes, very good. All right, we will move on to items regarding their collection franchise. The first is the discussion and possible action regarding policy clarifications regarding the color of trash bags in recycling programs. Mr. Ward?
Yes, if I could have the the slide from the PowerPoint. As we discussed at the last meeting, the board, the authority is a third-party beneficiary to the processing agreement between between Recology Del Norte and Recology Humboldt, which is now processing all of the materials. And as we discussed this last meeting, the board wanted this brought back to this meeting because the board was interested in discussing what we were going to do to reduce the contamination in our recyclables before that agreement was ratified. So this is a table I anticipate bringing back to the board pretty much until we get to below a 10% contamination level. So we're going to be marching our way down this table one action at a time, trying to reduce the level of contamination. We will expand and improve this as we have better information. And I already had a discussion with Mr. Herber of Recology, and he would change some wording on several of these things on some of the lower items. So, like I said, this will be refined as time goes on. But essentially, staff are recommending that we, effective immediately, ban black and opaque bags from Recology Del Norte's recycling programs. Essentially, people are putting trash inside these bags, and they're putting those trash bags full of trash into the recycling bins. And even the people who are putting correctly separated recyclables in the black trash bags, it looks exactly like the bags of trash that contain garbage that are contaminating our recyclables. In general, the processing agreement, which I've copied in the agenda packet, specifically says that essentially the authority needs to continue to take actions to try to reduce the level of contamination, or they have the potential of cutting us off. We're all striving, and we agree that we're trying to work towards a 10% contamination level, and we all acknowledge at this point we're not there. So none of us really wanted to have an agreement that was going to cause us problems immediately. They understand our current situation, but they do expect us to be taking action to reduce the level of contamination, and as long as we're doing that and we're monitoring it, they don't intend on cutting us off. So the advantage of this approach is it's comparatively easy to implement. There's no changes in the infrastructure that's required. It's mostly an outreach. And it's a positive step customers can take immediately to address this problem that is a widespread community concern. It's also easier for Recology staff to immediately identify violators, because if they see a black plastic bag, that's a violation immediately. So it gives them something they can respond to. Now, the disadvantages include that some of our recyclable materials are required to be bagged. Those include paper shreds, office paper, and open junk mail. So we're asking everybody to put those in bags, and it's a little confusing to some people, saying, all right, plastic bags aren't allowed in the recycling, but you want us to bag those. What are we supposed to bag them in? Well, if you put them in a paper bag, it's pretty hard to tie shut. And so while the plastic bags aren't recyclable, and paper bags you can't see through, by putting them in a clear plastic bag, that satisfies what we need. We need to be able to see that the recycling is happening properly, and those paper shreds and office paper and open junk mail can't just be loose in the recycling, otherwise they go all over and they become a hazard in themselves. So we're anticipating that with this change we would see some decrease in contamination, though we're not sure how much, and it would make hiding trash in the recycling generally more difficult, and consequently it simplifies enforcement. The processor will still need to dispose of the plastic bags as they are not recyclable, but all changes require significant outreach effort, because I often say this is a big boat that turns slowly, and it takes effort to do outreach, and there's a certain challenge of our recycling program in that we recycle a lot of materials. And when you inform people that the program has changed at all, some people get quickly overwhelmed with realizing that the program's pretty complicated. So we try to make a few changes one at a time. So the first changes we made, and I appreciate the board's action on this, is we eliminated styrofoam, plastic bags, hard plastics, and cartons from the recycling program. This is going to be the second major change that the board's considering, and that would be to ban plastic and opaque bags from recycling. And that is staff recommendation.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Ted, I don't know where to start with this, other than to see if there's clarity that could be added to this document as a public document for
Sure.
people that are going to view it in the future. One thing that immediately sets me off in this is obviously the eliminate unstaffed community drop-off bins. You're obviously talking about problematic sites like Smith River, my backyard, and yet I'm scrolling down advantages, disadvantages, impact-related issues, but I don't see another box out there that says, we are striving as a goal to find a site in Smith River that's occupied, staffed, per se, with a set time that we're gonna have this stuff going on. How can we communicate that within this document? Because I don't want that to be a priority that's dropped by this commission at all. It needs to be something that I think if we don't strive for early next year, by the end of the year, we need to be continuing to hammer home on this.
I very much appreciate that comment, and I considered putting that in this table, but part of the reason for not including it on this table is that realistically, I do not think that the development of that facility will happen in a timeline that allows us to address this problem. Our efforts to reduce the contamination to below 10% need to happen faster than we will be able to develop.
What's that timeline?
I do not have a timeline at this time.
Well, then what's the point of having a timeline not stated if it's not reflected in this document?
I agree with that, Commissioner Howard. I mean, that was my first question. There's no timeline here. I mean, I've said it to you out loud. I've said it to pretty much everybody in this room. I've been sitting here for 11 months, and we've been talking about this stuff. Until we put some time limits to this, none of it's going to happen. I mean, you can't just say ban plastic bags. We got to say within the next 60 days, we will not be taking any. You know, what are the actions when you see that black plastic bag?
Well, at this point in time, staff are recommending that they immediately be banned, and so what would happen if the board were to take that action is that without changing any of their existing documentation, Recology drivers, if they see a black plastic bag in the recycling, can tag that cart so that the customer starts addressing that problem immediately. So the timeline is this week.
And how is this done?
But we don't, but we need to give each change a little bit of time to, one, have the customers make the change, two, have time for the outreach to occur so that we can see that the change has happened, and then we need to see how much of a change has been made and therefore the additional changes. I do not at this point have fixed timelines. I certainly could develop them if that's the pleasure of the board.
I think it'd be more proactive if we did our outreach and then the ban went into effect. I think we're getting the cart before the horse here.
We've been
We
doing
need
outreach.
What I'm
Mr.
saying
Greenow, for
is concerning
11 months.
the bags, so we're not, penalizing our customers, or the customers. Wouldn't that make more sense?
That's certainly an approach that I'd be happy to follow the board's direction on that. We do need to do outreach without a doubt. I'd be happy to say effective as of this date in that outreach.
I would say, but I would go very short, like by January 31st, no more bags.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or
And
even sooner.
I would recommend even sooner, because
Yeah.
essentially as soon as customers hear this message, we want them to stop using black plastic bags in their recycling.
Can I ask Mr.
As soon as they
Brewer
hear it,
something?
we don't want them to wait until they're done using all their black plastic bags.
Jeremy, has anything been said on their, have they been given notices in their bills yet, your customers? I mean, to me, that would be the first place to start.
So just, it's Jeremy Herbert with the Recology. Anyways, like I spoke with Ted here a little bit, I really wasn't much part of this document that's up here. I think some of it has some good stuff in it. I think it needs to be refined, needs to be looked at. I do like the timeline. There hasn't been anything regarding this bag out on the bills, but I think this is a pretty drastic change. And to make a change like this, not only is it a big effort for the customers, but it's a big effort for us too, because our drivers really slow down writing a lot of tags. So there probably needs to be a consensus from the board of the direction, and then from there should be a small window of time to allow us to roll the information out to customers in many different avenues that we normally use. Once we get that information out there, I think we need to have a drop dead date that after this date, the finding or the counting of the violations will start. So I think there should be a little bit of a heads up, but I think that finding a consensus today, if there is one, and figuring out really how quick of a timeline, it should only be it shouldn't take more than a few weeks. I would say maybe early to mid-January we could probably pull this off.
When does your billing go out? When does your billing
It's
go out?
quarterly, and we just did one here not too long ago. So what's going to most likely happen, because this is a major change, and I think it's a major change for the positive for the community. So with that, I'd have to look into seeing what, I might be able to have to put out what we do is an additional flyer where we would mail that out to the customer direct. It's expensive, but it's the quickest way to do it.
With that flyer, can you put it with a clear plastic bag?
A free one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't laugh, that's not a bad idea. I'm gonna
It's
hit
not
you.
a bad idea, but I'm going to have to.
You're gonna tell me that's not gonna help? I think handing them a bag.
Yeah, we could do that.
That way if
I
I
like
had
the candy cane. As for the bag, it's gonna be pretty spendy just to get the flyer out, and that we're gonna have to just pay the cost on that just to get out almost 4,000 of these in a matter of a few weeks is going to be a task. And then to add a bag to that with the weight, it's going to increase the cost. So,
You were saying mid-January. Would Friday the 12th be a good drop-off date, you think?
it's whatever the board would like to consider. I just
want to give you plenty of time to get this information.
my theory behind it is there is people that have the plastic bags still currently in use. Christmas time is a really hard time to enforce just about anything because people are going to be dumping just crazy amounts of everything. So I think we should just let a few weeks of Christmas go by, allow that flow to subside a little bit, and then maybe initiate. That would be my suggestion to the board.
My feeling is that mid-month deadlines mean nothing to a lot of people. And
Okay.
I think if we need to give them a window for any other outreach that you're going to do to inform your customers that this is the direction the board has taken, I think we just say February 1.
I
From this
agree.
point forward,
I agree.
we're enforcing. We're not, there's no grace period. The grace period is
January.
January. February 1, we are now in official enforcement mode, so
I'm on board with that.
I'm
on board with that.
'Cause-
That's fine.
to me, trying to say middle of January and that
Yeah,
give them a grace period, it's for all practical
because nobody
purposes,
reads
it
the
is February
paper
1.
or they don't look at anything. So I really, to get the flyers out, it's going to take me a couple weeks to get flyers gathered and then to get them shipped. And then, even some of the commercial places that we send to have tenants, so they have to have time to get that to their tenants. And so we can also use other avenues that we normally do. We can do radio, newspaper, and of course our Facebook page seems to be very well. But I think, I think we're moving in the right direction, and I think if we try to make this happen too quick, it's going to be a mess. So I think we just need to let the holiday traffic kind of die out a little bit, and then just to go ahead and start the change.
What is their penalty?
Well, currently the penalty is just that if these bags are in there, they're going to get a yellow write-up ticket. We have that policy in effect that you get 4 of those, and we pull your recycling card. You're done. If you can't seem to get with the program, we make phone calls, we send letters, a lot of the drivers even talk to the customer saying, hey, you can't do that. So once this comes into play, we can start our informative information, and then you're going to still have those people that go, hey, after 4 yellow tickets, I still didn't know. I don't know how that happened because we had a conversation with you personally. Yeah, we just go in there, we leave them their trash, but we pull their recycling. That's usually what happens.
Okay. More questions? Mr. Howard? Oh, good. Okay.
I'm out. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Continuing now, I just want to make sure that folks can see this curriculum clearly. There's obviously one of the items on the agenda is something that we want to type number one. So having clarity on this, maybe calling it out, that this is what's being considered, items 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10. This is what's on this spreadsheet. You hear what I'm saying? Because
I do,
it's just what the board's potentially considering. We haven't done anything with this stuff.
correct.
We need clarity. Right now, it says crucially aggressive strategy to reduce trash contamination. It sets off alarm bells. Triple Hicks gets all the publishers. I see all kinds of phone calls comes in the middle of the night. What are we doing? What are we doing? So, the other piece on this universal collection service, we haven't discussed this a lot. Some of us have. And this is just for a specific area, correct? It's not countywide.
I was putting the options, laying them out there this way, so that the board was aware of the alternatives that are out there and the options that we likely will be discussing in future if we're not able to achieve a 10% contamination level. To be clear for everybody who's looking at this at home, or none of these actions at time, the board has not directed us to pursue any of these options at this point in time. And if the board takes any action today, it's really the only thing being considered at all is that first row of ban black and opaque bags from recycling. The other options, if they are considered, will be considered in future and as separate actions by the board.
This needs to be a standalone document, and if anybody gets involved with this, including our Triple Hit folks.
What's on it? It's posted.
It's posted as part of the agenda. And it's described in the text as these are alternatives.
I want somebody not to have you and you can be able to pick this up, look at it, see timelines, see clarity on what we're doing, what we're not doing, what's in effect, what's not in effect, and let it roll out. And if we are at all on this very bottom line, universal collection, if it's a specific area we're considering, it's countywide, clarify.
The board has not directed us in any way to pursue universal collections. This is merely described as an alternative course of action the board could consider as one of many courses of action. The board has not given any direction in that regard at all.
I think that maybe going forward, we need to redefine even what this document is called. It's not, and because for most of us, when we use the term strategy, we're assuming that that means that this is going to be enacted, that there are timelines associated with it, and I think that we need to say these are proposed considerations, something that takes strategy out of it, because I think that strategy to me is an action item, and none of these are action items at this point. Number 2 has been an action item, not necessarily the incentive aspect, but the enforcement thing. We've already taken action on that by changing the Recology's ability to do higher levels of enforcement. So there are some things that we have done, and we've talked about a lot of this stuff. But I think that strategy just gives that impression that we're talking about action items as opposed to possible solutions or considerations. So that may help with that. The other thing that Mr. Howard brought up, and I think it's a really good point, as you work on this document with Jeremy or whoever else or staff, I think that under that third line across talking about community drop-off bins, I think it's a related issue, the idea of ongoing considerations of staff sites in non-served areas. So that could be Gasky someday, that could be Smith River tomorrow, whatever. So I think that just simply making a statement in this working document that says we're going to continue to have conversations and outreaches for the possibility of manned stations in the outlying areas of our community that are not currently served if this takes place, because I don't think you can do one without the other. We've heard very clearly that doing one without the other is going to create chaos. So I appreciate the document, and I appreciate the spirit behind the document of trying to help us continue to think and work forward, but they're not action items. They're proposals, suggestions, ideas, and that's different.
And the board has not given us direction on any of these things, and that's part of why there's no timeline. In future, what I will do is I will separate these two. So I'll put a table in indicating the actions the board has taken
Sure,
and
good.
separate them, and then I'll flesh out, and I will add the additional transfer station as one of the items there, though, in all honesty, again, I don't think it would be responsive in the timeline that we have.
Yeah, but again, going back to what Mr. Howard said, we don't have a timeline. If we had a timeline, as Commissioner Calhoun said, we'd have taken action on some of this stuff. So the timeline, it exists, but it doesn't exist. And so I think that while we still have some of these fluid discussions, even though it may not feel timely to think that we can have a manned station in Smith River, that may not seem timely. I'm not convinced that that's not possible. I'm not convinced that at some point in time, the Tahoe and Dini Nation may come to the table and say, listen, we want to be a partner with this. We have an option here. It's not a permanent site like you have in other places, but here's a way maybe we could do that. I mean, we're seeing some really creative things that are happening with our partners across our county right now. And so I think it needs to be there, even if it doesn't feel timely.
Yes, sir.
Because it will be timely eventually. We have to do something at some point. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's not going to happen in 2018, likely, but there again, you never know. We elected Donald Trump.
Why not?
That wasn't likely. Nobody would have believed that during the primary season when it began. So the idea of, I know you go, God, all the illustrations you're going to give, but the fact of the matter is that we have to think outside the box, especially in a remote community like this, and that means that those things have got to stay front and center. If they don't stay front and center with the conversation, then the possibility of even making them happen down the road won't happen. We'll forget about it. You won't, but I don't have the confidence that a revolving commission like this will stay abreast of this if it's not in front of us. So that's my 3 cents. It was a little more than 2.
Let's say that's like 22.
2.5.
Along those same lines, I know we're talking about plastic bags right now, but we were talking about a manned station in Smith River or Gasky area or whatever. Have you talked to any of the other companies out there, like the Farmers, Palmer Westbrook, anybody out there besides the Tallawadani Nation?
We did look at a property.
Because there's all sorts of people who live out there. There's a lot of property out there.
Well, that's absolutely true, and to be clear, if staff wasn't doing anything else, we could certainly move this along more quickly. I can understand how long could it take? Well,
No, I understand. There's
There- like a-
limitations to staff.
well, and yeah, we're repairing a landfill, we're trying to do the transfer station floor repair. I understand and have heard quite clearly how interested the board is in working on this development. But while as big of a priority as it is, it doesn't help us with the ongoing compliance activities that we cannot in any way get away from.
All right. It was just a question.
But let me again state really clearly, I've heard that the board would like in future 2 tables, making it really clear the board actions that have been taken to date, the future alternatives that may be considered, making it really clear that those actions have not been taken, and that those future list of actions will include the development of a northern transfer station as part of the strategies, even if it discusses some of the challenges of timelines.
Perfect,
Thank you.
perfect.
So you just need consensus from us to go forward with the ban of black tags?
What I heard from the discussion was that there was interest in doing the outreach immediately, but that we would clarify that February 1st would be the date that enforcement would begin.
I think, given the fact that we're making a pretty significant change, I think it would be good to have a motion to take this action.
And also, the other bit is, I'm sorry, that's a separate item, excuse me, sorry.
Okay. So, do I have a motion to ban plastic bags in the recycling stream with an enforcement date being February 1, 2018?
I make a motion to ban black plastic bags and opaque from the stream.
Black and opaque, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the date?
Drop dead date is February 1st when they start
All right,
taking.
all right, I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion, and a second, any public comment?
I'm sorry, what was that second?
Mr. Reno?
Thank you.
No public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard? Yes. Chair and Score?
Yes. Very good. All right. Step one, huh? We hope-
The second part is the discussion and possible ratification of the processing agreement between Recology Del Norte and Recology Humboldt. And this addressed the action the board was most interested in, which was what steps is the board going to take to reduce contamination. So that has now been dealt with. Staff would recommend ratification of this agreement.
I have one issue. The end users portion. A lot of these are illegal or unseemly ways of getting rid of garbage, recycling, sorry. Why is incineration and energy recovery on this list? It just seems like those would be plausible ways of getting rid of either cardboard or paper that maybe the market's not taking, and you could possibly get something, they could possibly get something out of it.
Under state law, we have recycling requirements, and incineration can only be used to count up to 10% of those recycling requirements. So if there's a change in recycling versus incineration, then it's appropriate that we be notified of that before it happens.
Okay. So state law just dictates you can't do it.
Well, it's not that you can't, you have limitations on how much you can do.
All right, that was my only concern.
All right. Got any other questions about the processing agreement? I thought you were happy. I am. Oh, good. Yes, please do, Jeremy. I'm sure it does.
So I get my coal every year, huh? Yeah, waiting for my chunk of coal. So I want to get you guys, the board up to date on some things. I don't know if you've been really kind of watching what's going on in Oregon right now. Majority of Oregon is now taking all their recyclables to trash. So Recology is one of the very few companies, including even Ashland's over there. We're trying to work out an agreement to try to get Ashland materials to the processing facility as well. Recology's really taken a stand of being one of the few people that are still able to sustain moving recyclable material. So henceforth, the reason why it's very important to continue with the program of reduction of contamination is because right now China lightened up on the ban a little bit, so we are allowed not to exceed 1% contamination at port, which is, there's only a few companies in the United States can even meet that stringent policy. China is pretty much on the downfall right now. They're shutting down multiple plants as we speak. They're just not taking it anymore. So we
You're
are
talking
now.
about recycling plants?
Yeah, recycling. I would say 80% is probably going to China right now, but that's I mean, that's dropping down to like 30%. I mean, they're just shutting down the ports.
Is that the reason Oregon is going to?
Correct.
Trash
Yeah,
theirs.
Nobody's taking recycling any longer unless it's ultra clean. So if it's not ultra clean, they're not taking it. So we're trying to shift to domestic right now as long as it'll hold out. And now we're working in other markets like Vietnam, things like that, that are still port capable, that are actually on the economical rise while China's on the decline. So there's a lot of things that are taking place in transition in this next 12 months. But that's really the reason why I just wanted to kind of give that history that we're really pushing hard to keep the recycling moving. California still requires, a large portion of that to continue to move. And the markets are getting really, really tough. So, this is the main push behind why we've really got to get the recycling cleaned up, because it's really, we almost have to, our costs are going to have to really go way up just to get that 1% or less contamination-free material shipped.
Well, it
And
sounds
so-
like Sacramento needs to make some adjustments then, because right now the system's not working.
I'm with you. But there's also demand. It's always about, the demand of the market. And if, the market's not demanding, as with when we did the walkthrough with Mr. Ward here, we're spending about $85 a ton on glass to recycle it, and we sell it for 14. Right? That's an example. Just regular glass with the three colors, the brown, white, and green. So, the jars, things like that. So I just wanted to give you an example of the cost. So recycling it's not free, it's not inexpensive, but it is the right thing to do. We do.
So, cost you how much again?
We estimated on this last run about $87 a ton.
And you get
We get 14.
14, so why do you do this?
Well, so what we do, one is it's environmentally friendly to do it that way, to reuse that material.
People don't stay in business being environmentally friendly.
I agree with that. So what happens is there is material that's still viable. So that's why these recycling plans start to change a little bit, is because we're taking stuff that is viable, that we are selling, and we're offsetting that with the stuff that we're still selling, just not getting the money for it. So it becomes a balance there where, if we can break even and we're moving this product, it's the right thing to do. That's really what it comes down to being.
This is kind of going on the same lines you're talking about China. And,
Yeah.
and I understand all that.
Mhm.
And then I went to we had all these discussions. And I read an article last week that China was taking all our stuff, and that's what they're making. They're doing a lot of their products are from recycled goods. Well, now all their people are going, wait a minute, you're not letting it come in, and we don't have product to make what we want to make. And that we're going to start to see a shift, because the people are pushing the government. Do you think you'll see that in the next 2 years?
Well,
'Cause that's kind of what this
We've got
article is
specialists that
implying.
work these markets, and I'm not one of those, but, from what I'm getting from some of our meetings is that those markets are becoming really challenging, and that they are, where a lot of the Oregon companies that were shipping out, when they open those doors, those containers, and they see even a larger than 1%, they close the doors and they ship it back.
Yeah.
They won't even accept it. And so people are getting real scared to ship overseas because of that factor. And it's just the stringents are getting tough.
So
Sorry.
yeah, but it goes back to the same question, though. What do
Well,
we-
like I said, I didn't want to open up a huge can of worms. What I wanted to do is, I wanted to give some history on the importance of trying to get the recycling cleaned up, just for the fact of that it is getting really tough to recycle, unfortunately, because that's not really the direction we were hoping to go. It should get easier, not harder.
Maybe, Ted, you know this, I don't know, Jeremy. The recycling market, global picture, what percentage of a product stays in the U.S.? Or is it mostly a global economy with recycling? Is most of it heading overseas? You guys have a percentage? Does it say in the article that you're reading?
A large fraction goes overseas.
I'd
Do
say-
you have a large, is it over 90%?
I don't think it's that high. I bet you, I can probably only speak to our business a little bit, and I would say it's definitely over 60 to 70% would normally go overseas. So if that gets, we do have some domestic markets, Certain products do well here domestically that we ship to, and certain products don't really have the demand domestically as they do internationally. So that's always changing. Sometimes we'll take a load and we'll ship it overseas, and other times when the market demands domestic, we keep it domestic. The idea is to try to keep it domestic, but sometimes if there's no demand for it, you have to get rid of it somewhere. So. It really depends, and unfortunately, we're getting into an area that I am not really an expert to speak on, other than, I just have kind of an overview of kind of really what's going on, historically through the markets as they are today.
We've seen lots of recycling centers close recently, California even, and this is supposed to be one of the forefronts, in recycling. If we can't make it work here,
Well, this is
It's tough.
This is why we've had conversations about our director ensuring his travel to Sacramento to stay on top of this kind of stuff, because bottom line, they're setting policy for the entire state, being a leader globally on recycling, yet our policies are coming back to bite us in the ass. Our legislation's coming back to bite us in the ass right now.
right.
And this is super problematic, so obviously the more voices that we have at the table, which is yours, I think is extremely important.
Well, and I think that I guess I just see the near future. If it's costing you 85 and you're getting 14, how long is it going to be before the whole nuance of we're being good to the environment and we're continuing to do this, but the reality is me as a customer are going to start paying more, because you're going to have to charge more to supplement all these losses. If you've got a $64 loss per ton in glass, and then next thing you know, you've got a $50 loss in this other product, then you're going to make up for that, pay for all of us paying for our trash service, for the novelty, because that's what, unfortunately, we don't want to admit it, but recycling is becoming a novelty by the restrictions that have been placed, but the functionality of being able to do this with this changing global market. And I think that this authority is going to be faced with some tough questions about even processing, not just processing, but even what is recycling, in the same way we did with cartons and everything else, because I refuse to continue to pass on the cost to people because of an idea that doesn't work. That just doesn't seem right, and I don't know that we're going to be able to change the legislature as fast as it needs to be to avoid what possibly, you go down that list of that chart, you get down there to universal trash service, if we end up all the way at the bottom of that chart, that means that everything else has really started to crumble to the point where we're doing that, and my costs are going to go up. Because we're not going to be recycling.
No, that's a whole different.
I guess my point is
but-
we and I know that's probably being way too general, but the reality is that every time you keep taking a huge loss on one of these items that we're recycling, that cost is eventually going to eat into your profit margin to the point where eventually it's going to have to be passed on to the consumer.
Well, it is, and as of January 1, we're gonna. I haven't got the final numbers yet, but I'm gonna have to start paying a processing fee as of January 1st.
Well, we also talked about what's going to be, the legislation's brought down even further. We were talking about it in Sacramento with the whole composting and all these other demands that are going to come.
Yeah, they're coming
in the
to
next
the
year.
food waste and the
Food waste
composting.
can no
It's-
longer be thrown away.
It's all, see, what's good for parts of California are not good for Del Norte, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's gonna kill
And
us.
so I know that usually when they make these changes, there's a delay before it moves, to the
In the
rural
next year,
sectors,
you
but
wait. Oh, for my
It's-
business? Oh, that's what I'm saying. It's going to be
things
ridiculous. when this
things are
happens.
coming that are really
It's not going to
legislatively
be
that
good for
are.
us. And
It's a one shoe size that fits for everybody, and it really doesn't work that well.
it's an unsustainable system at this
Well,
point.
it can be. I mean, if there's some items that we can reuse, and why wouldn't we? I mean,
Well, I
we
understand.
want to continue to do what we can, but people also need to be somewhat flexible, understanding that, you know what, if we can market these items and keep them out of a landfill, we should, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
the
I
way I
don't
look at them
disagree
too. And so people go, hey, well, you're taking this stuff away from me. Well, unfortunately, it's you know, it's just getting tougher, and for, you know, the more that we can divert, the better. That's just really all it is. But it does have to make sense on both ends. You know, it's just a tough gig. So, but we're here and for the long haul. We're here to get it done. So,
All right.
we'll figure it out.
Thank you, Jeremy, I really appreciate it. All right, up for discussion and action is ratification of the processing agreement between Del Norte Recology and Recology Humboldt. Do you have any public comment? Seeing no other public comment, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for recommendation and vote.
Well, I still have the one concern, and I know you guys say it's not our concern, it's Recology's concern, and nobody's willing to put a time frame on this contamination. And we've got Humboldt that's down to 6 to 8. We got Del Norte that's at 28. And we talk about these steps, and that's great. It's good to see something happening after all this time. But at what point is Recology going to stop taking our recycling?
In the staff report is the section that addresses this, and essentially if the processor sees that there is an unacceptable level of contamination and they don't believe that we are currently engaged in an effort to reduce that level of contamination, they can give us a 90-day notice. And in that 90-day notice, we then discuss how they came up with their level of contamination and what we might be able to do, and then hopefully within those 90 days, we're back in business and still
So as long as we're
operating.
always taking steps and talking about it, we're good?
Making distinct efforts, not just talking about, but actually making tangible efforts that can be measured, and then we can say with a credible argument that we expect our contamination rate will be going down, and we're going to be looking at it in the coming weeks.
Okay, good question. All right, we have a recommendation regarding the processing agreement.
I move that we ratify the processing agreement between Recology Del Norte and Recology Humboldt for processing of Recology Del Norte's recyclables.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All right, I have a motion and a second. Would you please pull the vote?
I'm sorry, we're voting to ratify?
4.2?
Yeah.
4.2, thank you. Sorry.
all right.
Commissioner
I know, we're
Cowan?
so boring. Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard? Yes. Chair and Square?
Yes, very good. We will cancel the December 19th meeting. We don't have any other items. We do have one closed session item, performance evaluation.
I do have some announcements.
All
Mr.
right.
Chair. This is because these will happen before our next meeting or will be relevant to it. Hambro WSG is planning on opening a recycling center, a buyback recycling center, as of January 3rd. It will be at the Del Norte County Fairgrounds. They'll be open from Wednesdays through Saturdays from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. People who are interested for more information can call 866-321-8826. We'll be having free holiday tree recycling from December 26th through Wednesday, January 31st, 2018. Please, no stands or tinsel or decoration. Light flocking, that's the white stuff some people spray on the trees, is okay, but no stands or tinsels or decorations. Recology will also be collecting holiday trees. They need to be 6 feet or less in length, so if they're too long, you got to cut them up. They will be collected through January 31st from households who are already subscribed to trash collections. This does not count as a bulky item collection, and there's no additional charge for this service. So if you're a Recology customer, you can call 464-4181 to sign up to arrange for your holiday tree to be collected. The transfer station will be closed from noon Friday, February 2nd until Sunday, February 4th, and will be open at 8 a.m. on February 5th. This is for completing the transfer station floor repair. Kira Seymour spoke to Rotary on the 7th of December, and the landfill repairs are nearing completion. I do appreciate all the comments about the importance of going to Sacramento, and I did go and I attended the ESJPA meeting, worked with the California Product Stewardship Council staff, and I did meet with the Cal Recycle staff. So that's all very useful, and I totally agree. SB 1383 regulations for organics is just huge, and it's really important that we be engaged early and vocally in the development of those regulations, because that's a big, fat, hairy deal. No question about it. I believe as a rural community, it will hit us later, but still, as they're developing the regulations, it's the right time to be engaged in the discussion.
Okay, we're going to go into closed session, and so, thank you. We'll adjourn till January 16th, 2018. It says 17 in the packet, but it will be